Welcome into another edition of the Fantasy Authority podcast. I am your host, as always, Kevin Steele. You can find me on Twitter at FantasyWrath13. And joined, as always, I don't know what's going on the top of his head. Looks like a bunch of spiders crawling on his head and are having a meeting. Cody Kutzer. You can find him on Twitter at CKutzerFF. What's going on tonight?
Nothing, man. The hair is flowing. The curls are flowing. Gonna get these Dynasty takes flowing as well, man. Excited to jump on, have a little break from the craziness that's been going on, with all the coronavirus and COVID-19 stuff. So excited to give the people a little reprieve.
I hear that. It's just every day it gets a little bit crazier. Every week it gets a little bit crazier, and here we are. And so, what is it? March 24th as we record this. So, I felt like we actually could have done a free agency dose podcast because we've had so many more moves that have happened. We'll get to that in the news and notes here shortly. But it's been the one thing we've had to keep us going through this. We have no sports. It's gotten so bad that people are now playing virtual DFS, which is like people playing video games, simulations, if you will, DFS. So. And that's how bad things have gotten. Now you look outside and you see some birds fighting or something like that, and next thing you know, it's like the closest thing you have to sports.
I mean, it's a really wild time, and I mean, obviously there are much more important things going on, but just I'm hoping that this does not affect the NFL season at all.
I don't think it will. I honestly don't. People have talked about that, and people are like, "Oh, it's a real chance the NFL season can be affected." I don't think it's going to. I mean, I am no doctor. Let's be honest. Not even close. I Google a lot of stuff, like most people, but I would be floored if this was still like we were still in lockdown come September. I think most people have said they think. May, June, we should be getting back to normal. So hopefully that's true, unless you listen to the president, that we don't ever get political, and I don't really want to get political, but he's wild out there. It makes me laugh watching his press conferences every time, and the things he says, and like his advisors behind him are like, "Oh, just stop talking, just stop." It's hilarious to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if you're a staunch Trump reporter, just some of the things that comes across in those press conferences, like when he was talking about, like, do you ever think we're going to have this room filled up again and overflowing? Like, even if you love Trump, just some of the shit he says, you have to laugh at.
Yeah, it's always fantastic. Everything is going to be great, so great. We have many, many more great things to come. Like, it's just... Anyways, it's like I said, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Like we could get ourselves in real big trouble real quick with people's political takes, and I'm not a political guy. So, anyways,
we got some ball to talk.
Yeah. So, anyways, like I said, we have some pretty big news that has happened since the last time we recorded. If you haven't, go back and listen to last week's podcast. We had a great group. I mean, it was hilarious. It went way longer than it should have, but episode 171 with our free agency pod last week with Derek and Ryan Williams and Ben and Nate, half his screen was covered the whole time with Stephon Diggs and Amari Cooper and everything else, but it was a lot of fun. So anyways, Let's just jump right into the news and notes for this week, because we've had some more big signings, maybe even more than we had last week if it wasn't for the trades. But to start off, Todd Gurley was released from the Rams, and now he signs a 1-year deal with Atlanta, which was kind of funny because on Twitter, as soon as he was released, I was seeing people putting out that they thought he was going to go to Atlanta. I was like, that's silly. They don't have the cap space. And then they signed him like a couple hours later, and I was like, well, never mind. So what do you think about that move? Obviously, they released Devonta Freeman. So, I mean, he's obviously steps right in as the starting back there in Atlanta. They did address the offensive line last offseason through the draft. So, a lot of people were thinking that maybe at that number one, or with their first-round pick, that maybe they could go DeAndre Swift, something like that. But now, I still think there's a relatively decent chance they take a running back. It's just not going to be early.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think it was only, like a 1-year, $6 million deal. So they're not giving him a lot of money. Obviously, it's only the 1 year. I mean, if their offensive line can come together and play to the level of the talent they sunk 2 first-round picks in last year, obviously have some other talented guys in that offensive line. If that offensive line can get right, dude, to me, man, the whole thing is the knee issue. Like that just seems to be the ticking time bomb. Like it's gonna go at some point. We just don't know when. Right now, I think because we're going to be talking about some Dynasty startup ADP, I think it was like running back 20, I want to say. And Justin Mandaro and I just put out a piece on the Todd Gurley signing covering, the redraft and Dynasty impacts of it. And to me, that's a play where if you're a contender, I mean, you can take a high risk, high reward kind of upside swing on it. But man, the thing that the offense is obviously a big plus for him. The offensive line in general is an upgrade from where he was with the Rams. Are they going to lean on him as a bell cow? Is it going to be a split? Is he going to have the workload reduction and kind of keep an eye on that week to week? I think those are all the things that we still have to find out. But at the price that he's going to be going, if you want to take a swing that if he hits, he could be a league winner. He's probably going to be going redraft wise. What do you think? Maybe like 3rd, 4th round?
I don't know. It depends on a number of things. What they do at the running back position in the draft. If they take someone in the 3rd round, let's say, because like you mentioned, Todd Gurley's kind of a 1-year rental. If you look at Todd Gurley last year, I mean he just didn't produce at the same rate we saw in the years past. I mean, he still got opportunity. He was 9th in opportunity share, 6th in snap share, 17th in carries, and 20th in targets. I mean, he was on the field a lot. He just wasn't utilized as much as he was. The Rams were 18th in run plays per game. Still saw a ton of red zone touches as well. He was 3rd in red zone touches. So, I mean, he just wasn't efficient last year. And like you mentioned, with the injuries, that really killed him. I mean, really, you can really look at last year and say, if it wasn't for his touchdown, who he had 14 touchdowns last year,
yep,
that's really what saved his season. Because, I mean, other than that, he was not very good. He was not efficient. So now you can look at the Rams offense last year and say, well, the Rams offense wasn't necessarily the Rams offense we had seen in years past. And that is true. And their defense, if their defense does not get better, I still think that this offense is going to be on the field a ton. I still think they're going to utilize them a ton as a pass catcher as well. So I think that this could actually be a boost in some ways for him. Because I think that you could see, especially on a 1-year deal where Atlanta just doesn't really care and just kind of runs him into the ground. Now, can he stay healthy? And if he's able to, I think you could see him get back to being that top 10 running back. So if he went in the 3rd or 4th round in redraft, I would feel like that's a pretty good steal right now. But I think that we might see him go higher depending on what they do in the draft, where you could probably see him go in the 2nd, which I still think that maybe that's a decent value. But you have to factor in the fact that of his knee issues and everything else. So right now, I would say I'd feel comfortable taking him late 2nd, early 3rd. But that could change depending on what they do in the draft. Because right now, too, I mean, you look at this division. This division, I was thinking about this today. Is this the best division right now in football? I mean, you have now with the Bucs adding Tom Brady and whatever he can bring to the table. They still have Drew Brees in New Orleans. In terms of just offenses, I think this might be the top in terms of divisions. If you were to take all the offenses, I think this might be the best division in terms of total offenses.
Yeah, at least has to be up there. I mean, who else would you throw in? I mean, I guess if the AFC North can play up to their standards with Baltimore, if Ben's healthy, if Cleveland gets it on track, maybe them. Who else would you throw in this discussion as far as those offenses go?
You can maybe make a case for the NFC North or the NFC West, as well.
Yeah,
obviously with DeAndre Hopkins going now to Arizona, Kyler Murray with another year. Kenyon Drake being back in that offense, if he's there, the Rams are I think could be better this year than what they were last year. We bounce back a little bit depending on how things play out there with them. The Seahawks, I think Hopefully they actually use Russell Wilson a little bit more this year. But I mean, I think maybe that would maybe be the next place you could make an argument with in terms of just overall. But right now, I mean, like I said, that NFC South is no punk with all. I mean, each one of these teams. That's why I feel like right now, like I guess we can kind of get into this because of same thing that happened, and we can stay in the division. Is that looking at Carolina, which they released Cam Newton today, which isn't really surprising. I know they were talking about trying to trade him. Obviously, nobody really bit. There's some issues there that he can't really. We talked about this last week with Cam, but he can't really work out. But I guess he was able to do a physical that came out today. Then they said he checked out as clean and everything else. But teams can't do their own with everything that's going on. But with him, like with Cam Newton now, like I feel like that's an interesting spot where depending on what can happen, because we still have Jameis, we still have Cam, we still have basically Andy Dalton, who's still technically on the Bengals, but it's not, they're open to trading him, but I doubt they're going to be able to move him. So I think his fate is probably the same where they end up releasing him. But right now you have these three quarterbacks. Like where do you think the three of them wind up?
I have no idea, man. I really don't. I was just gonna throw this. We were talking a little bit about this in the Dynasty Slack chat. I mean, what spots are realistically open? I mean, you have the Chargers, obviously, but they seem kind of set with Tyrod, and I think they go somewhere in the draft. I mean, is it New England? Is that the one spot that we're really waiting for? Like to me, that kind of seems like that's it.
I think you could have them, depending on what the Bengals decided to. The Bengals will always Bengal, right? And who knows? Maybe they do something crazy and they draft Chase Young or something like that, and don't draft Joe Burrow. I don't see it, but I know it's always a possibility. I do think that you probably have to look at. I think the Chargers are certainly another spot that, depending on if they take one in the draft, but if they opt not to. I don't know. I mean, those three quarterbacks, that's not a crazy guy to go with. I mean, all of them are still relatively young. I think Andy Dalton is 32. Cam Newton turns 31 in May, I believe. And then Jameis
is still like 25. Yeah.
26. Yeah. And so all three of these guys are still relatively young and could be starters for a lot of. I mean, I think most of these guys, Cam Newton, if he's 100% healthy, a team could really get a steal from him because I don't think he's going to be able to command the money he hopes. I think best bet he takes a 1-2 year deal. I think the Chargers would make a lot of sense for a team that is pretty much ready built. I know they kind of like Tyrod, but if you can get Cam Newton in there with that offense, they have pieces. They have wide receiver. They have the tight end, which we know he loves to go to, which Gray Olsen. We have the running backs. I mean, everything's there. The defense is there. That's what we've kind of talked about. And maybe you take Cam Newton and see what he has left. Anthony Lynn there. So I think that's a spot. Like, I honestly think a good spot for Jameis Winston would be New Orleans. When I was thinking about where I think would be a good spot. I mean, we know Drew Brees is 41. This may be his last year. I mean, he really contemplated retiring this year. And then I think this might be his last year. And if it is, taking a Jameis Winston, we saw what they were able to do with Teddy Bridgewater and kind of rebuild him. And I think you bring in Jameis Winston because this is a team, again, that's built to win. So if something were to happen to Drew Brees again and he goes down, you need a competent backup there. I know they have Taysom Hill, but I don't think Taysom Hill is the answer. And really, if Taysom Hill is there, like, if he's your backup quarterback, do you really want him out there and using him in all these packages and everything else, risking him to get hurt? Your backup quarterback? No, probably not. Right? And so I think they do end up adding another quarterback. And if they could add somebody like Jameis Winston, who's only 26 and who can learn from Sean Payton, and then you get him in this offense, if something were to happen, I think you'd at least feel you would feel good enough about yourself that he can keep things moving for you. And with Sean Payton, who's such an offensive-minded genius head coach, I think that could be actually a good fit for someone like that. And I actually think Andy Dalton would be a really good fit in New England as well. I don't know what New England's going to do. Honestly, it feels like New England is starting to, I'm wondering if they're tanking, to be honest with you, because we've not heard nothing from them. They've really done nothing through free agency. They haven't made their offense any better. And right now they're talking about Brian battling for the starting role.
It is wild times in New England 2020 right now. But yet, like I said, if I would love Cam with the Chargers, but it kind of seems like they're headed toward Tyrod either being that bridge quarterback and drafting someone, letting them sit, or just, letting a rookie come in and compete. But like you said, everything is set there. They have the offense, they have the defense. To me, it wouldn't make, I would rather drop in a Cam if he's fully healthy versus going through some of the growing pains you might experience, because you probably figure they're more than likely looking at Herbert there. I think Newton is a higher upside play. Long term, no, but that's a team. If they can stay healthy, they have everything on paper. So, New England is super interesting. I like the Jameis call because at this point it seems like that's what he's going to be going toward, right? As a backup role, maybe like get like a 2-year deal in New Orleans, something like that. Let him see what he can do in that offense. But super interesting to see how all that's gonna pan out. I forget where I saw it, but somebody was talking about the spots that would possibly be opening after 2020. There's going to be a lot more spots than, talking about Indianapolis opening again, maybe Tampa, New Orleans. So there seemed like there were going to be more opportunity following the 2020 season than there is going into it.
Right. And so like I do think with Jameis, that's why it would make some sense, because he's still young. He's 26, and you get him in there, you get him to learn your offense as a backup. Maybe you can get some of these things out of him, with the poor decision making and everything else that we've seen displayed from him. But a team like New Orleans, who's built right now to contend for years beyond, like they're not like the window's completely closing after this, and the team's getting super old. So they have the pieces to be able to do this. So I do think Jameis in a spot like that. I did see somewhere, which I didn't really think about, but was him going to play baseball, because he actually was a pretty big prospect coming out for baseball as well. And so people had talked about, I guess the Bucks actually put in a provision in his contract that was not going to allow him to go, that they could take him to court if he went and tried to play baseball.
What?
Yeah. So like, he's not like Kyler Murray level baseball. Like Kyler Murray was a top 10 draft pick in baseball. But like, he's certainly somebody that could go that route if he wanted to. I don't think it's going to happen, but you never know. He's still young enough. He's only 26 years old. So,
man, I now that you say it about the baseball thing, I remember seeing that, but I didn't know about the provision and everything. That'd be wild. Switch sports for a year. Maybe come back to the NFL after 2020 if he doesn't get a deal.
Try to, or Tim Tebow. That's still what Tim Tebow's doing with the Mets. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because like I said, like we said last week, it's kind of like musical chairs, and the music has stopped, and there's really no other spots left. So we'll see what happens here with the situations. But we had Melvin Gordon, who almost the next day after we did the podcast last week, signed with the Broncos to a 2-year deal. I guess that means Royce Freeman's dead. I don't really know. This doesn't really feel great for Philip Lindsay either. Someone like this. No, maybe it's more of a name, and maybe he doesn't get as many opportunities as we think. But like, it feels like that he's going to be sort of the lead back here. And so I feel like you have to knock Philip Lindsay down, and you have to knock. Royce Freeman's dead at this point. I don't know what they're going to do with him, and which is kind of sad, because if you look at Royce Freeman's numbers, like he's been decent in the opportunities that they've given him. And so I don't really understand this move. Like, this feels like kind of a wasted move to me for them. But where, in terms of Dynasty, where do you view these guys now?
Like you said, Royce Freeman's dead. I don't really have any interest in him unless like somehow he would land with like Tampa Bay or something, because they were a team that was rumored to be in the Gurley sweepstakes and things like that. But as of right now, Freeman is, if things stay the way they are, he's going to be droppable. By the time the season rolls around, he might be a roster cut for you. Lindsay has to take a hit. Like they were talking about bringing someone in to complement Lindsay, not to, kind of be the 1A to his 1B. So Lindsay has to drop down. And I just don't know what Melvin is going to have left in the tank. I mean, I think that's an up and coming offense. That's someone that Drew Lock is someone we're both little sneak peek into what's coming. Someone we're both higher on in terms of Dynasty ADP than what the consensus is. But I mean, I think right now he was RB 18. I want to say, and obviously this is before the news dropped and before he ended up with the landing spot. But I mean, I think it's probably be about the area that he goes, kind of that mid to back end RB2. And I think he's probably appropriately priced there, but I would be a bit lower on him than that RB18 range. I mean, the four, maybe even five rookies, the top five running backs we've been talking about all offseason, I'm probably going to have ahead of him, especially as of right now, and then depending on what kind of landing spots we get. But I mean, the Melvin Gordon thing kind of feels the same way as Todd Gurley, where if you're a contender, maybe you take a swing on him. If you can get him at a cheap price, it might be able to pay off. But if I'm doing a startup, Melvin Gordon is not going to be somebody that I'm necessarily running out to target.
Yeah, I mean, Melvin Gordon's never been somebody who's been particularly efficient, anyways, in his career. I mean, so
right.
I mean, we have seen him, with Austin Eckler and everything else, and kind of share backfields and stuff like that, and still be productive. It's going to be interesting to see, though, I think, with what Denver decides to do this offseason, or not this offseason, but this season, and because they've predominantly been much more of a run-first offense, and I don't know if they're going to try to open things up a little bit more this year with Drew Lock and that offense. I mean, we are, looking forward to that, and we'll talk about that more here in a little bit, but I just don't think this is a great spot, especially for, because I don't know how all this is going to shake out. Like, if Philip Lindsay falls to a point where he becomes more of a value, then maybe I'll be a little bit more interested. But I don't know how things are going to really divvy up between touches and targets. And is Royce Freeman even still going to be there? If he is he still going to be involved? So I think this is something we're going to have to wait and see how this all plays out in Denver. But it's just not a landing spot that I got super excited about when it happened. The other moves we've seen is Eric Ebron signs with Pittsburgh. Emmanuel Sanders now goes to New Orleans, which he was somebody that we talked about a lot last week. And I guess Traquan. I guess Traquan's not going to happen. I guess Traquan now is the number 3 wide receiver, which they don't have Ted Ginn anymore, so I guess they could still utilize him as kind of their deep threat. But Emmanuel Sanders latches on here. I don't think this is I think it's an okay move. I mean, obviously going to New Orleans but we know that Michael Thomas is still going to command a heavy target share. Drew Brees tends to spread the ball out, to everybody not named Michael Thomas. So we'll see how this plays out. We really haven't seen, though, a number 2 wide receiver really be relevant in a while in New Orleans. So I think this will be one to kind of monitor. And then you have Robbie Anderson finally signs. People have been waiting for this to happen. Not the spot that everybody was hoping. He ends up going to Carolina, which I don't really love this for him from a fantasy perspective. I think this is a good NFL move. I mean, you never have enough pass catchers there in the offense, for Teddy Bridgewater. But, Robbie Anderson, better NFL move than fantasy, because now with DJ Moore there, with Curtis Samuel, with Ian Thomas, like there's just a lot of mouths to feed in this offense. And so I'm still pretty high on DJ Moore. I like him a lot. But past that, I think, Robbie Anderson, I think they'll have boom weeks. I think they'll have weeks where they'll be relevant, but I think it's going to be too hard to predict.
Yeah, it's kind of has that LSU feel. Bringing Brady over, where they're just going to spread the field and just try and get a bunch of guys going, yards after catch kind of thing. I think if you're still a Curtis Samuel believer, that this is going to give you, an even better chance of getting him on the cheap. I saw a lot of RIP Curtis Samuel going around after the signing. And obviously, anytime you bring in somebody like Robbie Anderson, those targets are going to be, split even further, and it doesn't look great for him. But if they're going to be running 3 wide, the majority of their base set, and they're going to be spreading the field, I still think there's a little bit of hope for Curtis Samuel. Outside of that, I think DJ Moore is obviously the unquestioned one here. How are you valuing these guys? Where do you see them Or actually, give me your take on Emmanuel Sanders with Michael Thomas. Do you think this is gonna? Do you think Michael Thomas is going to be mainly an outside guy? I think last year, whenever he was split out wide or whenever he was lined up at receiver, I think it was 25% of his snaps came from the slot. Do you think Emmanuel Sanders eats into the majority of that and Michael Thomas is just lined up out wide more? Do you think they switch? How do you think that's going to affect, where he's lining up? Because when you put Michael Thomas in the slot, I mean, that's almost unstoppable.
No, I don't think it really affects too much in terms of that. Emmanuel Sanders, started off early last year, looked really good, and then kind of trailed off towards the end of the year. Again, I think this might be a better NFL move than it is fantasy move. Like, I don't mind it. If you could get him as kind of like your wide receiver 5, 6, something like that, in redraft or whatever, like, I wouldn't hate that. I mean, I'm sure in Dynasty you could get him almost for free. I mean, as old as he is, what is he probably coming into his age 32 season? I believe he was 31 last year. So, yeah, I mean, I don't hate the move, but I don't think it's like lights everything on fire. But, in terms of just good offenses, I mean, that's kind of what we're looking for in fantasy football always. So, he's in one of the best offenses in the league. So, I think there's some excitement there, but not enough for me to like really buy into it. And I feel like that his ADP will probably rise past the point that I would even want to mess with him anyway.
Yeah, that's a good call because people are going to see the Drew Brees and the Saints offense. So I think you're right on that one. That makes sense. Are you interested at all in Brashad Perriman to the Jets? Does that get you excited?
I wanted him to go to the Chiefs so bad, but like I don't like. I hate Adam Gase. Adam Gase is the stone cold worst, right? Like, and so it's hard to really get behind because like Brashad Perriman, I mean, bless his heart, man. Like he was kind of he was left for dead, and then he shows up to Tampa Bay last year. And especially the second half, put together a really strong second half, especially once Mike Evans and Chris Godwin went down. I mean, if you look at his numbers, starting basically week 13, he had 13.7, 16, 34.6, 17.2, and 24.4 fantasy points. I mean, he had two? Yeah, I mean, he had 2 weeks, and as the top 5 wide receiver there. I mean, it's hard not to be excited about like, okay, is he finally figuring things out? And like you watched him. And at first, like I remember in DFS, like when it kind of happened, I was like, Brashad Perriman, we're going to play him. Yeah, he was super cheap and I'll probably play him some. But then like by the end of the year, by that, by you got to week 16, week 17, it was like, okay, you're jamming Brashad Perriman in anywhere you can because he was that good. Now going to the Jets, like it's just not a spot that like really does a lot for me. No. And gets me super excited, even though that like there should be opportunity there because Robbie Anderson, as we know, is gone. They still have Jamison Crowder, who's going to get peppered with targets because Sam Darnold loves targeting him. And then you still have Le'Veon Bell there, Chris Herndon, if he could ever actually stay healthy. That dude was supposed to come back 37 times last year and never made it back. I remember every week last year, we're like, on our the waiver show we did every week, talking about him, like, oh, Chris Herndon,
make sure you pick him up.
Yeah,
gotta get him.
So there should be opportunity there, but unless Adam Gase finally figures out how to run an offense, it's hard to really get excited about it. Like I think the dude has talent, and I think that maybe he could finally be unlocked or woke, if you will. But we'll see what happened. And so if he was like a 10th, 11th, or 12th round pick, something like that, like in redraft, I would probably be interested, as just kind of a flyer. But I think anything higher than that, I probably wouldn't. Because, I mean, I think he's still relatively young. He is 26. Okay, so, I mean, he's not that old. Super athletic, but we'll see what happens with him. Hopefully, this isn't the end of Brashad Perriman, especially going to the Jets. We've seen what Adam Gase has done. He just squashes the life out of all fantasy assets, and that's just kind of what he does. So,
yeah, obviously the play here in Dynasty leagues is just to trade him right now if you have him, if you can get anything for him. Then obviously Adam Gase is going to destroy any value that he has, and then you can pick him up off waivers after he inevitably gets dropped because this is where players go to die, unfortunately.
Yeah, so that's sad. And then the other one that we didn't have on the show sheet that we did need to mention.
Funch.
Yeah, is Devin Funchess going to Green Bay. The dude just keeps going, just keeps getting opportunities. Last year was a Colts. People kind of got a little excited that he got hurt. Now here we are, goes to Green Bay, a team that really needs a wide receiver. That a lot of people we kind of had linked to, it'd be great if Robbie Anderson went there, and that was kind of a spot we were hoping he'd go to. The problem with Rashad Perriman here, in my opinion, anyways, is that he's kind of the same. I mean, he's obviously not the same class, but he's the same type of wide receiver as Devontae Adams. He's just another big body wide receiver. Now, he's still young. He's only 25, and we've seen in spurts that he can be somewhat productive. Now, in Green Bay, with Aaron Rodgers, I think this is an interesting spot for him and somebody that I have a little bit of interest in if he comes back and he's healthy. Again, this is probably another guy that I would look at as – because right now I think he's the wide receiver 2 there. I mean, I know you really like Allen Lazard.
Don't you dare.
But I think right now you could look at Funchess as the number 2. And again, if they don't do anything on the draft of significance, I think you have to have a little interest in Devin Funchess to see what he can do. The problem, the other issue too, is this offense going to become more pass heavy? Because we saw last year how it just destroyed Aaron Rodgers' value because they ran the football so much, and Aaron Jones just hogged up all the touchdowns. Now that changes from year to year. That's not really a sticky stat, something we really shouldn't be looking at. But if this team becomes a little bit more pass heavy and starts to pass the ball a little bit more, I think then that's where I would be more interested in it. But on the surface, again, this isn't like one of those oh man, I love this spot for him. But I see a path where he could be a relevant wide receiver 3.
With that, I think you're going to have to hit the right weeks. He's not someone I'm going to look at and feel confident as plugging. If you're in a deeper, redraft league where I'm going to feel confident plugging him in, on a weekly basis as my wide receiver 3 or 4. I think it's something where you're going to have to get lucky and play the right weeks. Maybe he's a better best ball asset because of that. Like you said, it was not the Aaron Rodgers that we're used to. Maybe that's because they didn't feel like they had the dependable, wide receiver 2. Jimmy Graham was obviously dying on the field as we know it. But I also don't see Funchess as coming in and solidifying as the wide receiver 2 role. This is something where if they go out and they end up spending, top 2, top 3 round draft capital on a rookie receiver, then we're not talking about any of these guys. It's going to be Adams and the rookie.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's the whole point of all things. I mean, so I guess let me ask you this, because all the other thing that we think we don't even really need to talk about, but I saw the Jaguars sign Tyler Eifert to a 2-year deal. But we don't. That's not something we really need to get into. But I think this is an interesting conversation, I guess, then as to leading into what we're going to be talking about with startup ADP. So if you're doing a startup right now, I imagine there's probably a lot more startups going on than usual, especially with everything going on with coronavirus. We're all quarantined. We can't go anywhere. We're looking for something to do. And so this is a perfect time to just get a bunch of startups in, right? And so right now, you're doing a startup. You don't have any draft capital, so we don't really have all the answers to the test because we don't really know what's going to happen with some of these guys, where they're going to go. We can try to project, but at the end of the day, we're just as much blind as anybody else is. And so in terms of some of these guys, like a Devin Funchess that we just talked about, or other guys that may be dependent on if somebody gets drafted there or not to really is going to hurt or help their ADP and their value. How do you navigate those waters with those players?
With startups, this is going to be such a typical hedge life answer coming from me right now, but it really just depends on how you want to build your team. If you want to go super youth heavy, obviously that's where you're going to go with that. That's actually something I think that if you're doing your first Dynasty draft, where I think you can get caught is overrating youth. But to me, you really just have to pay attention to how everyone else is drafting, and kind of just you have to be super fluid and and what you can go in with the best plan. But if you notice that everybody is kind of, let's say you're in a league where maybe one or two guys have been in a dynasty before, but you're kind of taking your home redraft league and you're turning it into a dynasty. If you notice that everyone is kind of just drafting the way that they would with with a regular redraft kind of league, that's where you want to zag and start picking up youth, start looking at some of the guys who are going to be, the core of your team for the next 3-4 years. So to me, I try to keep it balanced no matter what. You still want to get you'll hear some people say don't draft anybody over 28 years old, and they'll throw out some kind of arbitrary number. Breaking news: D-Hop and Devontae Adams are 27 years old, and they're still going to be damn good for the next couple of years. So to me, it's more about watching what everyone else is doing and trying to get an idea of how they're building their teams, and then kind of coming up with your your strategy based off of that. But don't overrate youth. Don't oh well, this is a dynasty, so I have to get all the guys that are 20, 21, 22 years old. You definitely want to have a balance, and look for guys where you can see the opportunity if the situation presents itself. I feel like I may have just talked into a massive circle there. So
no, I think that makes sense, right? So the things that I've noticed too with the dynasty community, anyways, and I am I try to be transparent. Like, I am not a huge dynasty guy. I've been much more DFS and redraft through my life. I have played in some dynasty leagues, not many, but I have, been there. And the things that I've noticed and witnessed when it comes to dynasty is, like you mentioned with age, I feel like everybody, or the majority, overvalues age and would rather take a guy who is 21 years old versus that really has never been accomplished, and versus a guy who's 24, 25. Now, I understand the long-term longevity and everything else of a player where you may for example, Julio Jones, for example, who's 31, and, he may have 1 or 2 good years left in him. So I somewhat understand that, but he's still dominant. He's still one of the best wide receivers in the league. And where I feel like people try too much to worry about age, and not I feel like, aren't we trying to win? Like, that's always been my question with Dynasty, is what I see is a lot of times I'm like, are you guys trying to win? Or are you trying to win your trade so you can post it on Twitter? Because that's what it feels like so often than not. Is it's all about trading. I'm like, oh, I just want to trade a trade, and we're just trading. I'm like, I want to win. That's what I'm trying to do. I felt like if I was entering a Dynasty startup, and maybe this is complete wrong, but I feel like that I would go about it in a way where I go in and I'm just drafting like it's redraft. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but because I'm trying to win that year, trying to project what happens 3 or 4 years down the road is super tough. Even NFL people cannot do that. And trying to expect somebody like us to try to be able to figure out what's going to happen 3 or 4 years from now. Because imagine, DeAndre Hopkins just got traded, right? You would have said that a month ago. People were like, he ain't getting traded. What are you talking about? That ain't never going to happen. And if DeAndre Hopkins didn't go to Arizona, had he went to a different landing spot that wasn't as good, not that DeAndre Hopkins would be dead, but you certainly wouldn't feel as good about him. Or a player, like Stephon Diggs, for example. Stephon Diggs now gets traded. Now he was traded to Buffalo. People don't love him nearly as much as they did when he was in Minnesota. And so, there's a lot of stuff like this that happens. And so trying to project so far out, I feel like is a little bit silly. Or is that crazy? Or is that wrong?
No, that would be something where if, you're in a 12-team league and you notice the, 9 of the other 11 are just going super youth heavy, that's a massive thing you can exploit to where you go for it this year. You know what I mean? That's something where, like I said, you have to be fluid and kind of try and pick up on what other guys are doing. If you see that a Julio Jones is, you're at the back end of the second round and he's still sitting there, I mean, you snag him at that point, or see if you can get him on the on the turn in the third, something like that. But the one area where I would say that you'd want to be cautious with that if you do go kind of the redraft and dynasty approach is just to not completely overload on just the 28, 29, 30-year-olds that are producing right now. Because if one of those guys gets hurt, or two of those guys get hurt, or that age cliff kind of hits, and they start falling off production wise, and let's say someone like you, Kev, where you just might be like, I don't want these future rookie picks. Like, give me the guy who's going to produce now. Let's say the older guy's injured, production falls off. Now you don't have any picks. Now you're in a hole. You know what I mean? Like, you can still go out and build a veteran heavy, productive team, but do it in a way where you're not going to be, setting yourself up for failure if, a thing or two goes wrong. But I definitely think you're right in saying that, because that's definitely something I did with my first Dynasty startup. I remember at the end of it, I literally went through and like added up the ages of like my running back core, my receiver core. And I remember like texting my buddy and being like, dude, the average age of my running backs are only like 20.8 and my receivers are only like 22.4. Man, I'm super young. I'm going to be set up for the next 10 years. So, I mean, that's definitely something that happens and is, pervasive, because on a surface level, it makes sense. Oh, dude, I'm going to this Dynasty League. I'm going to have these guys forever. What do I want a 31-year-old Julio Jones for? He might not be playing next year. That's just something where you have to be aware of what you kind of are thinking the other people in your draft are doing, and then kind of attack it that way. But I mean, you can definitely do the redraft portion of it, but I just wouldn't go all in on, well, it's the 5th round. I need a tight end. Jared Cook. Step on up, buddy.
No, yeah, and I think that does make some sense. Like, I guess with my redraft strategy is a little bit different. Like, I am definitely not somebody who loves loves older players. Like, it's just not my thing. Like, I would not that I like that's the only thing I think about, but most of my teams are a little bit younger. But like, it's not just the only thing I think about, I guess. And it's just, I don't know. And like some of the things like we'll talk about here shortly with some of this. What are some things for people who are just starting out, have never done it? Maybe they're just now getting into Dynasty. They want to check it out. They're on Twitter. They see people talking about it. They decide to jump into a couple Dynasty startups. Like, what are some things that you've seen that would help people? Like, I think one for me, certainly, and I actually put this out on Twitter and somebody brought it up, and I think it's a really good call, and that's paying attention to what the settings are. Because I sometimes think people try to show how big their penis is by how many different settings are in Dynasty Leagues. I mean, there are some wild Dynasty Leagues, like just with all kinds of different things, little different caveats, different settings, different things. I mean, there's this thing called taxi squads if people have never heard of Dynasty. And maybe the first time I heard that, I'm like, what the fuck is a taxi squad? So like, like there's all sorts of things with Dynasty. There's Devi. There is so many different things. You talk to like Travis May, who did it was like a 1,000-player draft or something crazy. Like it can get wild with Dynasty real fast. I wouldn't recommend going and jumping in those. I mean, try to jump into like a little bit more casual Dynasty League probably for your first time. But what are some things you see? 'Cause I definitely think settings is number one. You definitely need to know exactly what your point settings are,
absolutely.
Roster restrictions. Like those are key with Dynasty Leagues, critical with Dynasty to understand those things. But what are some other things that you've seen?
Yeah, that's a huge one, because then you're also getting into Superflex, tight end premium. How many, because I feel like for the most part, redraft you're getting your typical like 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receiver kind of thing. One of the Dynasty Leagues I'm in is just all flex, just 5 flex spots. So it gives you obviously more flexibility in terms of how you're going to build your roster and how you want to do that. Scoring settings, points for first down. You're talking, for quarterbacks, is it 4 or 6 for a passing touchdown? Things like that. Those are super, super critical, and those can really set you back. I've been in some startups where people are just like throwing around their future picks, and if you're in an auction, throwing around auction money, and then all of a sudden you look at your team and you're like, wait, what did I just do? And now you're screwed for the next 3 years, and you're locked into a dynasty. And now, I mean, you have no shot in competing for another 4 or 5 years. So something I liked that, because I did see that, something I liked that he brought up, Brian Teeter, was he commissions a couple leagues and he puts it up on the message board and makes everybody respond that they read them. That way, I mean, you're not dividing the league right off the bat, where you're just going to have one or two teams that are just absolutely terrible because they didn't take the time to read the rules. So that's a huge one. Like I said, the ones for me, we've already kind of touched on already, just paying attention to how other people are drafting, not only in how you're going to set up your team right now, but also with trades going forward. I mean, like, Kev, if we're in a dynasty league and I see that you're, talking about trading your picks, like, I'm going to come after your picks, because if I kind of have an idea of the kind of players you like, if I have someone who I think might be kind of hitting that production cliff, I'm going to throw them out to you. And that's something that's huge, because then you can see what kind of positions these guys go after. Is there like a certain school that they go after, or maybe even like, are they SEC heavy, that sort of thing? Those can be all super, super valuable whenever you're looking at trades and trade negotiations. And the other thing, again, like we already talked about, don't overrate youth. I'm going to have this guy for the next 8 to 10 years. Dude, there's drafts I've done where, a 30-person kind of roster where I have literally the next year 4 or 5 of the same 30 that I drafted. Don't get yourself in the mindset of like, oh, well, I'm going to take Joe Burrow as my quarterback one because I'm going to have him for 15 years and he's going to be a baller. Don't get yourself caught in the youth trap, and I'm going to have this guy, because if you always have to be open to, if someone comes around with the right kind of offer and they're offering you a veteran plus rookie picks, or another player that you like for your young asset, you always have to be open to taking a look at that trade. So those are the main ones we've already hit on.
Okay, yeah. I know this is a time that people get into. Maybe I was here thinking about it. Maybe we need to do a TFA Dynasty League and just get some listeners in there or something like that, and
absolutely,
just get something going. Get something cooking. So if anybody's interested in that, hit us up on Twitter, and maybe we'll do that at Fantasy Rat 13 or at FF, or you can hit us up on our own at the site at FF_authority, or you can also hit us up on email, thefantasyauthority1@gmail.com. So anyways, let's keep it moving here, because we still got a lot to get into. So I think let's just go ahead and jump into some Dynasty ADP. Let's do a little price check here, because I went and I started looking at some of this stuff with some of these ADP for some of these guys. And let's just start at the quarterback position. We're going to do some guys we're a little bit higher on than consensus, and we'll also do a little bit that we're a little bit lower on than consensus. For me, I'll start it off. The guys that I have here is, one, I have Drew Lock, I have Matt Stafford, and I have Baker Mayfield. Drew Lock right now currently is going at QB 23. Matt Stafford at QB 16, and Baker Mayfield at QB 9. And I also want to give a shout out to DLF, because that's where we are getting this ADP from. They do great work, but I wanted to put that out there as well. That's where we're getting this information from. But anyway, so with Drew Lock, like that's something we kind of already talked about earlier. But with this offense, with Cortland Sutton and what they're doing with him, Noah Fant, and really Drew Lock, really to end the year last year, showed some real promise and showed some flashes. I can't believe it took them that long to bench Joe Flacco. But once they did, we kind of saw some of the traits, and I've watched Drew Lock, because I'm a Missouri fan. I'm from Kansas City, so I'm a big Tiger fan, and so I've watched Drew Lock, and I remember hearing about him even when he came out of Lee Summit, which is a local city here outside of Kansas City, and how people were really raving about him. He has all the arm talent in the world. There was some concerns with some other things, some accuracy issues, whatnot. How he goes around in the pocket, but for the most part, what I saw from him last year was pretty promising. He looked awful against the Chiefs, but that was to be expected. But regardless of that, I think Drew Lock at least is an exciting prospect right now, and somebody at QB 23, super young. if you're looking for some age, but that can be had relatively late in a draft. Like if you're in a single QB league, not super flex, like I really like that. And I think Drew Lock is somebody that I would definitely be looking at. And then Matt Stafford, as long as things stay the same and he does not go anywhere and he's the starting quarterback for the Detroit Lions next year, that offense is still set up with Kenny Galladay, Marvin Jones, TJ Hawkinson. They still have Danny Amendola. Like Matt Stafford was balling last year before he got hurt with the traverse process fracture or whatever at his back, which is obviously a concern. But I know that injury is not necessarily as serious as what some other back issues could be. Tony Romo had it before, but so I'm not really that concerned with that. But QB 16 feels like an absolute steal, in a startup. Like if I can get him there, if I can have him, I have no problem taking Stafford. Stafford's still only 32 years old. It's not like he's old. You should be able to trust him for the next 4 to 5 seasons at least. And with this offense and the pieces they have around them, like I have no problem with targeting Matt Stafford. The other one is Baker Mayfield. I was surprised. I kind of went back and forth on this because QB9 is still a little bit high. I think especially when you look at how he performed last year, he was all the rage. He was all the hype. I would bet heading into last year, his ADP was likely much, much higher than what it is right now. And so I feel like this is a little bit more of a buying opportunity in this offense. They still have Jarvis. They still have Odell Beckham. They added Austin Hooper. They still have Nick Chubb. They also have David Njoku. So I think this offense could really take a big step forward this year with Stefanski as the head coach. Now that Freddie Kitchens, who never had any business of being a head coach, is gone. So I like Baker Mayfield. If you have somebody that maybe doesn't feel as great about him, I think this is another great buying opportunity for somebody like Baker Mayfield. And if I had him as my QB1, I'd still feel great about it.
Yeah, Baker has everything around him to still be successful. If they can get that offensive line figured out, I think that's going to go a long way in helping him. I just pulled it up. March 2019 ADP. Baker was QB6. So I felt the same whenever I saw that. I was expecting him to be lower because that is something that as much as ever.
Wouldn't that have been? That was probably pre-Odell Beckham trade, wasn't it? If it was March of last year, I think that was probably pre-Odell trade.
Okay. Well, I'll look it up here as
I was curious what his ADP was like around August, like heading into the season last year before the season started.
I'll pull it up here in a second. But Drew Lock was a guy who I was going to write down, but you beat me to the punch there. He just seems like that's if you can, I think he's a really nice target in super flex leagues for your QB2. If there's someone that's kind of like sleeping on that situation a little bit, Noah Fant, Courtland Sutton, there's someone who's rumored to be looking for a guy like if they can get like a Henry Ruggs to a speed kind of guy like that to pull some of that coverage away from Courtland Sutton and Noah Fant, kind of let them work underneath. I think that would be, that'd be massive. Baker Mayfield QB4, August 2019. So
yeah,
he's like I said, someone who has everything set around him. I like that. The guy that I threw on here was Carson Wentz. He kind of feels like he's starting to get a little bit of that Matt Stafford treatment, where he just every year just going in like underrated. I mean, if you look at what he did last year, I think he finished as QB 10. I want to say, obviously, depending on your scoring format. But if you look at their receiving situation, their top 3, I guess receivers in air quotes, in terms of catches and yards, was Ertz, Goddard, and Miles Sanders. So literally their top 3 options for their receiving game weren't even wide receivers. So you got to figure they're going to do something. That's where I want to see Robbie Anderson go. Even before any of the free agency stuff, they were rumored to be, in the running for a first round wide receiver. So, I mean, dude, if he's going from Greg Ward to whoever they end up getting in the first, it wouldn't surprise me to see them kind of double down that position, maybe take someone early, round 1, round 2, then maybe dip back into it round 4, depending on what their pick situation is. But Carson Wentz, QB8 right now, he's somebody who just seems to kind of be, obviously he's not being slept on if he's still a top 8, but I think in terms of what his finishes could be at the end of the year. I mean, I think you're looking at a top 3, top 4 kind of guy. So he's the guy who I chose, who I'm going to be a little bit higher on. In terms of who we're lower on, so whenever you looked at this and you were talking about receiver, you threw out Juju to me, and you were like, I don't get this at all. The guy that I don't get at quarterback, Daniel Jones at quarterback 11. Am I missing? Like, am I crazy for thinking that's way too high for him? I mean, I get it. He's someone who also has the pieces around him, but I didn't see like he had a couple nice games, but I didn't see anything to me that inspired like I wouldn't want him as my QB1. That's not. I mean, is my top option. If you were able to get him last year in a rookie draft and he's sitting there as your QB2, maybe behind an aging veteran, sure, that's fine. But if I'm doing a startup right now, I am not feeling comfortable with rolling with Daniel Jones as my QB1. And the other one that I have down here, Jared Goff. I mean, until they fix that offensive line, and I don't know how they're going to be able to do that with the situation there and with their picks and everything. The book is out on him. You know what I mean? It's pressure, not letting him get through his progressions, getting him off of his first read, and then if you can collapse the pocket, he's kind of left for dead. And I think he was QB 14, I want to say. So again, just not a guy who that price is a little bit too high for me.
Yes, I mean, he was somebody that was very volatile last year, right? I mean, he
definitely had his games.
Yeah, he had 32 against week 3, but then he went 12, 10, 5, 10, and then week 8 he put up 28, and then 11.8 in week 9, 28 week 10, 14, 8, 35 in week 16, and then 14 in week 17. Like, he beat up some really bad teams. One of those, so if you look at the teams he did it against, the Redskins, the Jets, the Lions, and the Bucs.
Probably.
Yeah, those were the teams that he did it against. No, against the Cardinals, he only put up 10.4. That's when they got dusted, if you remember. So I mean, if he can become more consistent, like we know he has the pieces, right, with Sterling Shepard, which Sterling Shepard is criminally undervalued as well. But they still have Golden Tate. They still have Evan Ingram. If Darius Slayton can take another step forward this year, that could be a team that could take a wide receiver too. Wouldn't surprise me. But right now, like, I mean, I get it. I guess a little bit for me, I still think that's high, but I think that's people valuing the age more than anything. Because, looking at their, just the quarterback ADP, seeing the guys that are going before him and guys that are going after him, I think you could easily make a case about it, right? So, like, you look at just the ADP, and you see Daniel Jones going 11. You have Tua going 12, Burrow going 13. You can make that argument, whatever. But then, like you said, you had Goff at 14, Matt Ryan at 15, which I get he's 34 years old, but still, I think Matt Ryan, you could safely say that the next 3 to 4 years, he should still be a pretty solid quarterback. And then you have Stafford, you have Darnold, who's going at 17, and then you have Winston. So I don't know why. I'm sure Winston's gonna, drop like a rock. And then you have Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins at 31 years old doesn't really compute to me either. As how is this dude who is going QB 20? He's only 31. I don't really understand why he's going so as low as he is either. Like, I felt like that is that is completely mispriced. I think that's somebody who should be going much higher than that. For me, the guys that I was a little bit lower on. Deshaun Watson, now losing DeAndre Hopkins. And Deshaun Watson does not look like he's happy. I don't know if you saw the tweet that he sent out. He does not look like a really happy guy right now because that offense, at least as things stand at this moment, does not look good for the Texans. And it has to hurt Deshaun Watson a little bit. Like, I don't think it's a huge blow to him, but it is something that I think it's going to knock him out. And you can make a case maybe he's not a top 5 quarterback now without DeAndre Hopkins. And if he's going at QB3, I think that's something to consider. He's still very young. He's 24 years old, same age as Patrick Mahomes. And then you have Josh Allen, who's going QB7. And again, like I do like the upgrade now with Stephon Diggs there. I think the passing offense could be a little bit more. But if he's not able to rely on his legs as much and stops running, I think that's a problem. Like, I would much rather have Carson Wentz than him. I would much rather have Baker Mayfield than him. And so, like, I just thought QB7 was a little bit too high. I get the age at 23 years old, and that's probably why he's going a little bit higher. But for me, I don't know. Like, I just think that's a little bit egregious to me.
Yeah, that's a bit high for me too, because at that QB7, you're kind of taking him at his ceiling, and you are also banking on him having the rushing yards and the touchdowns. Which, I mean, obviously you can. He's shown that, like, that is the one thing he's been consistent with. It definitely hasn't been his passing over the last 2 years. He has been consistent with it with his rushing game. But then you just have to ask yourself, how long will that last?
Yeah. So, like I said, Kirk Cousins should definitely not be going QB20. I think that's ridiculous. But
the crazy thing about that too is this was probably in before the Diggs trade. You know what I mean? So, like, he was getting drafted at QB20, and that was with Diggs still being in Minnesota. You're muted.
No, yeah. Where did he finish last year? Oh, I guess he did finish QB19 in 15 games.
That was also, like, that first game he threw like 15 attempts or whatever that ridiculousness was, I think, against the Falcons.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, to start the year. Yeah, he was like, it was even worse than that. Like, I remember us talking about that for like the first month of the season. It was ridiculous how little he was being utilized. But I mean, 3,600 yards, 26 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Like, yeah, I mean, I still think that's way too low for him, and somebody who should be valued a little bit more than that. So let's go over to the running backs real quick. Don't want to spend too much time on these guys, but for me, the guys that really stood out to me as I was looking through this, one was Josh Jacobs, and then Marlon Mack, Darius Geis, David Johnson, which I have to believe this is going to correct itself once we find out, now that I think once we get to April ADP to kind of circle back here and look at this, because they have David Johnson at RB40. Like, I just cannot imagine a world where he's going to go anywhere close to that. And then the other one is Darrell Henderson. Again, now that Todd Gurley's gone, we haven't had time to really process that. So I'm almost certain that he is going to skyrocket up with this news. This is a situation though with the Rams. I guess we didn't really get too far into the Rams side of it whenever we were talking about this, but with the Rams side of it, for me, I look at this like we're going to have to wait and see, because I could see them easily taking a running back in the first 2 or 3 rounds, or the first 3 rounds of the upcoming draft. Now that Todd Gurley's gone, they still have Malcolm Brown. Now, if Darrell Henderson flies up draft boards, like, I would probably have a little bit of interest in Malcolm Brown as well, because he's the cheaper asset. I know everybody loved Darrell Henderson last year. People were just in love with Darrell Henderson, and so I know he's going to go much higher than that. And then David Johnson, I have to believe he's going to go way higher than RB40. But, I thought those were interesting guys. So for me, Josh Jacobs at RB10, like, that's not egregious. It's not like way out of bounds. But I still think that he's being undervalued. And I think a lot of people still look at him like he's more of an in-between-the-tackles grinder type, not somebody who's going to be utilized as a pass catcher. And I think that's going to change. I know people, when they brought back Jalen Richard, people were like, "Oh, see, that just indicates that they're going to utilize him much more as a between the tackles guy and not get as much opportunity as a pass catcher." I don't believe that. I think Josh Jacobs is a terrific asset. He's still only 22 years old. He really produced really well last year. I love Josh Jacobs. And if he's going, like, Derrick Henry going ahead of him makes me laugh. He's somebody that I'm lower on than consensus. He's only 25 years. He is 25 years old, but I would take Josh Jacobs all day, 7 times over, over Derrick Henry for me. Like, it's just easy for me. I would take Josh Jacobs over Aaron Jones, because I love Aaron Jones. I am the Aaron Jones bandwagon guy. But I think Aaron Jones, one, we know the touchdowns are going to come down. If that happens, how much to utilize? He was a super boomer bust. He was like a Tyreek Hill of running backs last year. And if that sort of equals itself out, how far is he going to drop? Love Aaron Jones, but I think Josh Jacobs is a much more secure asset, younger. and I think in an offense where he is going to be the focal point, and so I would take him above him. I think you can even make an argument if you want to take him above a Nick Chubb or a Joe Mixon, because like Chubb, I love Nick Chubb, and I think hate the fact that Kareem Hunt is still there. I don't think it's going to affect him as much as people think it does, but I think that he's in that conversation with those guys, though. I think that's where he should be in the Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb range, right? But he's not. So he's going at RB10. If I can get him there, I am thrilled.
Yeah, I do like that RB10 price, and I think that Richard signing, kind of pushed him down to there. But I think there was something where it was like they called it phase 2 for Josh Jacobs, where they did want to get him more involved this year. Why he wasn't more involved in the passing game last year, who knows? Maybe it had something to do with the injuries, or maybe he wasn't picking up the offense. I'm not sure on that. But you mentioned a guy that I am actually higher on, that I would definitely not take Josh Jacobs over, and that is Joe Mixon coming in at RB6. So kind of the same thing you were talking about with Josh Jacobs. It's not, it's obviously not egregious. He's obviously not being slept on by any means, because both these guys are top 10 backs. But I think Mixon should be up at, I would personally have him at 4, possibly even 3. Obviously behind McCaffrey and Barkley, excuse me. But I think Mixon belongs in that top 3, top 4 talk. With Zeke, obviously that offensive line is kind of starting to come unhinged a little bit between the injuries. I think, did I see that right? That Frederick retired?
Yeah, that is a huge blow to that offensive line. Big blow to that offensive line.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Zeke doesn't need a top tier offensive line, but to go from what he's used to running behind to what possibly might be around the corner, I don't think we've seen the best of Joe Mixon yet, and that's where with Burrow coming in, they're going to have the first round pick from Bama, the tackle. He's going to be should be healthy, obviously, so they're going to be getting him thrown into the mix. And as bad as that offensive situation has been in Cincinnati, Mixon's still been producing, and he's been a fringe, kind of in that 10 to 13 range, depending on, full PPR, half PPR, or what have you. But he's somebody I would definitely be taking him over. I think I want to say Kamara was going 4th in the positional ADP anyway. That's I would at least at 4, if not at 3. He's someone who I'm really high on, and I think Derek last week was talking about he's going to be taking Nick Chubb, higher than what everybody else is, and people are going to kind of be looking at him funny when he keeps continually drafting Nick Chubb. Joe Mixon is going to be that guy for me. Just some other names I'll throw out real quick. David Montgomery at RB23 and Justice Hill at RB42. With Hill, I think we saw kind of what he could do once the shit hit the fan and they weren't controlling the game. Dude has a lot of juice. He's still someone I'm interested in, and an RB42 price. I'll be all over that, because they're still going to be a run first team. Then with Montgomery at RB23, I think he should be closer to the mid RB2 range. I don't think with everything that's been going on in Chicago that he should be a lot higher. But he's someone who I'm still believing in. Got to figure if Foles takes over that starting job, that's going to kind of lighten the boxes for him. And then if they can improve that offensive line, I think that'll be a huge help. And they've already talked about the coaching staff. That is, they've already talked about wanting to get him more involved going into year 2. So if he sees a tick up in carries and hopefully with targets as well, if Tariq Cohen starts to get phased out a little bit, I think that would be huge for him.
No, I love Joe Mixon. I love Nick Chubb. I can see where you're coming from with David Montgomery. I think this is probably the buying season for David Montgomery now. Yeah, everybody was super high on him heading into last year. We talked about the missed tackles, the broken tackles, and all this stuff. So yeah, I mean, for me, I guess with him is that I see that I feel like that this is one of those guys that now you head into this year and that you really try to take advantage of people and buy him at a discount versus buying him at his peak. And so I like that call. So did we already talk about? Yeah, so the guys we're lower on. I've already talked about for me that's Derrick Henry. I think if we're talking about PPR formats, I want no part. Like I am not as high as everybody else is on Derrick Henry. There's a lot of people that love Derrick Henry, and I think he's a fun back to watch. And we saw it last year, that he can go on these incredible runs. We've seen it the last couple of years, really. But with him having no pass catching upside is always what's going to drive me away from him, because if he does not find the end zone and that offense isn't as good as it was last year when they went on that crazy run, which I don't think it's going to be at all, that's going to be a problem for Derrick Henry. And they lost a ton of pieces on that team. And if they're a team that starts playing from behind a lot, Derrick Henry's dead. Right. And this is a team I would probably really watch. That we haven't really talked, when we talk about, and we'll go through it again here in the next couple of weeks when we start talking about these rookies again. But this is a team that really could take a running back much earlier than people think, because Derrick Henry was franchise tagged this year. I don't know if they're going to give him any sort of big deal. I think this is going to be an opportunity where they franchise him, they run him as much as they can again, and then they let him go next year. And so I think this could be another buying opportunity. But for Derrick Henry, like I said, this isn't a great offense, and it's not a team that I think that they're going to try to run the football like they did last year. But I don't think they're going to find that lightning in a bottle if they don't. RB9 is a heavy pill to swallow when there's quality running backs behind him, like I already mentioned with Josh Jacobs, that I can have, or some of these rookies that I'd rather have than him. So I just don't love that spot. And then Melvin Gordon, RB18, it's not a terrible landing spot or it's not a terrible price at RB18. I just still think that's a little bit too high. I'd rather have him in the, I don't know, if I could get him as like a late RB2, I'd probably feel a bit better about it, just because with Phillip Lindsay there, I don't know how heavily he's going to be utilized and how this offense is going to go. This is a downgrade in terms of as things stand right now with the Chargers going to Denver. But if this offense can become much better, but like I said, I don't know how this is all going to shake out with him, because Phillip Lindsay's kind of been the man there the last 2 years. And so I don't know how this is going to work out with him. So those are the two guys for me that I'm a little bit lower on than everybody else.
Yeah, man, the Derrick Henry one just sticks out like a sore thumb. He's the one I wrote down too. We're on the same page there. And the same thing with you're talking about with Melvin, the guy that the other guy that I have down here, Kerryon Johnson, RB21. Again, that's not an awful price, but he's just someone that I think I'm just out on at this point. Hasn't been able to stay healthy. That run game hasn't looked great whenever he is on the field. He's someone who I'm like, and he's had everything kind of going for him too. The offensive line, Matt Stafford when he's healthy, the receiving weapons that we were talking about a little bit earlier. I mean, so some of the guys that are going after him, Le'Veon Bell, he's someone who I'm out on as well. But Montgomery at RB23, Clyde Edwards-Helaire 24, Kenyon Drake, Marlon Mack. I would take all those guys over Kerryon Johnson, just me personally.
It's tough with Kerryon because when you watch him play, like, he's an exciting player to watch, and you see the upside, you see what everybody else sees in him, right? But he just can't stay healthy. And like, I don't know, like, is this a Dalvin Cook situation where if he can finally stay healthy? But the other thing is, the other equation to that is, I don't think they're going to commit to him like the Vikings have with Dalvin Cook. I don't think he's going to see that type of workload. I know, we had Nate on, and he's really close with the Lions. The Lions fan, follows the Lions closely. He's talked about how they love Bo Scarborough. We'll wait and see. I could also see them drafting somebody, as well. That this is another spot where it possibly could. But yeah, I tend to agree. I think there's running backs that are going later than them, going later than him. If he was going a little bit later, maybe 4 or 5 picks later, I'd be a little bit more inclined. Because if you look, I mean, Todd Gurley's going at 20, which I think that'll change now that we have a new landing spot for him. But like you mentioned, David Montgomery, Marlon Mack, I definitely agree with. Darius Guy, somebody I talked about.
Yeah, guys, I think if you're looking at two guys that are injured, I think Geis's ceiling is higher. Like, I don't see why there's a 8-spot difference in terms of ADP positionally, and then looks like so Kerryon his overall ADP is at 53.5, and Geis is at 74.6. Like at that difference, you're almost talking about a 2-round difference, something like that. Give me guys at that price. You know what I mean?
This guys now they did bring back Adrian Peterson, but I'm not worried about old ass Adrian Peterson. Like again,
Peyton
same thing
Barber,
with
baby.
yeah, they brought in
Did
Peyton
you?
Barber too. Like, yeah.
I can't believe we didn't mention that.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry guys. We missed that one. We'll do better job next time on that. But yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. So, and another guy I'd rather have. Now, age isn't really the same here because Carry On's only 22, but Damian Williams, RB32, playoff Damian, like the guy who just won MVP. And again, this is for people that are in dynasty leagues. I would be pounding the table to try to trade for as much Damian Williams as I possibly can because everybody seems to think, again, just like last year, that the Chiefs are going to draft a running back really high and kill Damian Williams. And if they don't draft a running back or they take one in the 5th or 6th round again, Damian Williams is an absolute steal at RB32 because he, again, we talked about it last year, could easily be an RB1 next year. Like, in that offense, nothing's changed in this offense other than whatever they decide to do with Sammy Watkins. I don't know what's going on with that. But Sammy Watkins is most certainly gone. But regardless of that, they're going to head into the year with Darrell Williams, possibly a rookie, depending on what they decide to do, Damian Williams, and Darwin Thompson. Darwin Thompson is not the answer. I know a lot of people thought he tried to make him a thing because everybody that was against Damian Williams, anything the Chiefs did, as soon as they signed LaShawn McCoy, people were all about LaShawn McCoy. I'm like, are you kidding me? Anyways, we have seen now 2 years in a row, if Damian Williams is healthy, when he is healthy, the dude is a baller, and RB32, he's only 27 years old. It's not like he's 30. Like, yeah, he's getting a little bit further. He's getting closer to that age, but he doesn't have all that wear and tear that a lot of 27-year-old running backs have. So I'm not really worried about that. As long as he can stay healthy, Damian Williams is an absolute steal at RB32. And I don't know if there's a bigger steal than him. For reference, Damian Williams is RB32, and he's going in the pick 95. Ronald fucking Jones is going at RB36 and at 107. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, the thing with Damian Williams as well. If you're trading for him now, even if they do, like Kev, you're saying they're not going to take one early, but let's say they do, round 2 or something, day 2 they end up taking somebody. Even if that is the case, like you're not giving up. You're not going to have to give up a lot to get him. So even if they do bring in a rookie with higher draft capital, it's not going to set your team back. On DLF right now, they have a trade finder where they pull trades from my fantasy league from MFL, trades that have actually happened. The most recent 2, Damian Harris and the 305 rookie draft. I mean the 305 rookie pick for Damian Williams, and the other one is Hayden Hurst and a second for Damian Williams. So I mean, you're not having to spend high prices. Even if they do bring in someone, it's not going to set your team back. So this is something where like that's already being baked into his price right now. Like you said, everyone's assuming or thinking that the Chiefs are going to take somebody, day 1, day 2 of the draft. So that's why his price is as low as it is. So even if you go and trade for him, you're not going to be giving up a lot. And if for some reason they do end up taking a rookie running back with higher draft capital, it's that's not a move that's going to set your team back. And if they don't, his price is going up. So if you don't believe in him long term, you can easily flip him for a lot more than what you paid for to get him in the trade initially.
Yeah, and I think that's even the smarter move is doing something like that, is acquiring him and then trying to flip him or once we get much closer to the season, because I would be absolutely floored if the Chiefs took a running back 1 in the first round. I think the most likely scenario for them is they're going to trade out of that first round, and because they picked 32, I think to try to acquire some more picks. I think they trade out of that spot and move down into the second round, and they'll have 2 seconds. And I could possibly see them with one of those seconds take a running back. I think it's in the range of possibilities. But it's really going to depend on what they're able to do because this team, like I've mentioned a bunch, and I feel like it's kind of a broken record. But this is kind of the Chiefs are kind of between them and the Bucks. They're kind of the last two really sexy spots for a running back. Now that the Falcons signed Gurley, and the Texans acquired David Johnson. So now you kind of remove those, so that this is kind of the last two spots you have. And so for the Chiefs, though, like the Chiefs still need a corner. Like basically they're running out Rashad Fenton and Shavarius Ward. Like they need a corner desperately. They need defensive line help. If they can't bring back Mike Pennell, they definitely need some defensive line help. They need offensive line help. They have pieces that they definitely need much more than a running back. And so, like, that's why I would be really surprised if they took a running back as early as people think. I think it's more likely they take one in the third or fourth or fifth round. That's just kind of been Andy Reid's MO anyway. Like, I would love if they took a Keyshawn Vaughn. Like, I would love that. That I think you could get in the fourth round. But, again, whoever they take, I don't care who that running back is. Now, it would make sense if it was a second-round pick running back, but like if it's like a fifth or sixth, seventh-round running back, people are going to move that guy ahead of Damian Williams. That guy's going to take over that guy's spot. I don't care who it is. Nobody was fucking talking about Darwin Thompson heading post-draft, or pre-draft. Nobody. The Chiefs took him, and it's all of a sudden like, ooh, boys. Like, okay, here we go. Darwin Thompson time. Get the fuck out. Like, it just people just hate Damian Williams. I can talk about this all night. See, I got going. I did this myself. But moral of the story, buy Damian Williams. He is way too cheap right now. It could be an absolute steal. Golden ticket. Because he could end up being a top 10 running back next year. No doubt. So for wide receiver, Allen Robinson, I'm much higher on. I know he's going to like wide receiver 20. I think he could easily. He's a guy that I would not be surprised at all finishes a wide receiver 1 next year, especially with a better quarterback play. Mitch Trubisky was a train wreck last year. If Nick Foles takes over that job and actually looks like a competent quarterback, I think that's wheels up for Allen Robinson. Taylor Gabriel's gone now, so it's basically him and Anthony Miller. You have Tyler Lockett who's going at wide receiver 30. I'm like, get the fuck out! Like what? Like I don't get that one as much. I know now that they brought in another piece as well there, and they still have DK Metcalf, who a lot of people love, but I don't know. I just thought wide receiver 30 was way too low for me. I think the dude's still dynamic. He did deal with some injuries last year, so I love Tyler Lockett. I think if I can get him at that price range, I am doing backflips. Deontay Johnson, I have talked about this a ton. I love Deontay Johnson, and he's somebody that I would try to buy everywhere. He is going way, way too low. Will Fuller's ADP, I'm pretty sure. Again, we haven't baked in the DeAndre Hopkins news because he was going ridiculously low. I feel like that was even way too low, even with DeAndre Hopkins still there, because he was going, where was that at? Yeah, wide receiver 51. And I'm like, what? Like, I don't understand that one. Even with DeAndre Hopkins there, that's still incredibly too low for Will Fuller. Healthy Will Fuller should be more like in that 30s range, in my opinion. But he is a guy that's probably going to move up very, very quickly now that DeAndre Hopkins is gone. Deontay Johnson, for reference, is going at wide receiver 48. I think that is incredibly too low. So those are kind of the guys that I'm looking at that I would love to buy and that I would be in on. And also Sterling Shepard is the other one. He's going at wide receiver 52. I just think that's way too low for him. He is getting older. He is 27, but he flashed last year as well, even with Golden Tate on the field. So I think he's their number one wide receiver. And somebody that I also, wide receiver 52 is just incredibly too low for him.
Yeah, but both those guys that you talked about with Fuller and Shepard, I think the reason why they're getting pushed down is just injury concerns. Obviously, Shepard a little scarier with his concussions and the head and the neck issues that he's having. But Fuller, I mean, his game is speed, and he keeps getting those soft tissue injuries. So I think that's why they're pushed down. But yeah, in the 50s, that still seems too low, even with those injury concerns baked in. Guy that I had listed here, A-Rob, you already touched on him, so I'm not gonna dig any further into that. Tyler Boyd at wide receiver 25. I mean, it's probably a fair price, but I'd be willing to take him. 5-6 spots higher than that. I mean, with what he's been doing with the offense they've had centered around him, and the issues that they have had. Burrow comes in, if they can get that going, I think wide receiver 25 would pay off pretty easily. And then, we alluded to this a little bit earlier with some of the free agency talk and the signings, but Jamison Crowder at wide receiver 55. I mean, you would talk about someone who's just going to be absolutely peppered with targets. Whether it's half PPR or full PPR, wide receiver 55 just seems way too low. And like you were talking about with the Chiefs, you want to talk about another team that has just a shit ton of needs and holes that need to be filled. I mean, the Jets, I don't think they're going to be able to have the luxury of going out and, spending a first round pick on a receiver like that. So I think he goes into that season easily as the wide receiver 1, and then you're looking at Perriman, Herndon, and Lev Bell to take the rest of the targets. So he's somebody who I'd be super interested in. He's never sexy. He was hyped up a couple of years ago, and that never really panned out. But if he's going to be the number 1 target for Darnold, with not much else going on around him, wide receiver 55 is just way too low. Who are you lower on, Kev?
Well, I just wanted to say really quick. I was looking it up really quick. But like Deontay Johnson, he really finished the year strong. If you look at the last 4 weeks of the season, finished as a mid-level wide receiver 2. Had 19.6 against Arizona, 9.2, 22.1, and 9.4 over the last 4 weeks of the year. Had some other decent weeks as well. And really, I mean, their quarterback situation was a train wreck all year with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. Like, now with Big Ben back, like I think Deontay Johnson could really take off big time. And I think he's somebody who's going to gain more steam as the season goes on. And it's going to be harder to acquire. So I think this is a perfect buying opportunity right now for somebody like Deontay Johnson. It's interesting now. I was going back and actually looking at that over the last 4 weeks. Here are some of the wide receivers that finished inside the top 12 over the last 4 weeks. Rashad Perriman, which we already talked about. And then I noticed Steven Sims, who he's somebody that a lot of people have been talking about all offseason as well as somebody is kind of at that buy on the a good buy low candidate right now. So I saw him and I thought that was, and then Jamison Crowder, who we've talked about, also finished over the last 4 weeks of the season as the top 12 wide receiver. So some guys that I'm lower on. Okay, there's 2, and one is Juju Smith-Schuster. And I, again, in our Dynasty Slack this morning, I put this out there as I was kind of looking at some of this stuff. What in the fuck is Juju Schuster doing going as wide receiver 5 and number 12 overall? I totally understand. But again, this is where I feel like people are overvaluing someone's age. Like, this is at his peak. Like, this is his ceiling as wide receiver 5. Like, absolute ceiling. I don't get it. Like, I know that he's young, and I know that last year we could write that off as, hey, this is just a bad year. Their wide receivers were trash, or their quarterbacks were trash, and it just kind of it was what it was, and he can definitely bounce back. I think he can, but I have real concerns if he can actually be a legitimate wide receiver 1, and at wide receiver 5, like, all the upside's gone. Like, he has to hit his absolute ceiling, and there's just much better options there at wide receiver that I would much rather have later than him. I would much rather have Chris Godwin. Give me Chris Godwin all day, twice on Sunday. Juju Smith-Schuster's 23. Chris Godwin's 24. Chris Godwin's going at, he's wide receiver 7. DJ Moore. I would rather have Amari Cooper than Juju Smith-Schuster. Yeah. People can make a case, I guess, for A.J. Brown. I'm not as high on that as other people are. But you can make a case for him. Like, there's a lot of wide receivers that I feel like that you could still make a case for to take over Juju Smith-Schuster. And I get that the age that, you want to factor that in a little bit, but this is just too far. Like, I don't understand seeing him here at wide receiver 5. Maybe this is wrong, and maybe this, if you look at other places, maybe he's not going this high. But, on DLF, like, I was blown away when I saw this. I thought he'd be going like wide receiver 15, 16, something like that, especially as bad as he was last year. So when I saw that, like, it threw me off. Like, it really did. I was like, I did not see this. And then the other one is N'Keal Harry, who's going at wide receiver 32, who did absolutely nothing. And right now we're looking square in the face of Brian Hoyer and Jarrett Stidham as a starting quarterback of the New England Patriots. And I know they don't have a whole lot else there, but like I just was floored to see that at 32. Like he's somebody that should be going in the 50s in my opinion. I know that he was coming. He was a rookie last year, and so he definitely could bounce back. And he was a guy that everybody loved last year. I haven't seen anything that says to me like, oh, okay, this guy's a boss. I know he was suffering from injuries last year. I know it's not fair to count that against him, but I just felt like that was incredibly too high for a player who's done absolutely nothing on an offense that looks to be much. It's definitely doesn't look like it's going to be anywhere as good as it was last year, and that's not saying a whole lot because that offense wasn't very good last year. So those two spots for me, like especially for N'Keal Harry, I just thought that was way too high.
So I'm going to rattle off some names here. Just stop me whenever I get to a point where you would take the player that I name over N'Keal Harry. So everyone I'm going to be naming here is going after Harry. Mike Williams, T. Higgins, T.Y. Hilton, Justin Jefferson, Henry Ruggs, Darius Slayton, Mecole Hardman, Curtis Samuel, Denzel Mims, A.J. Green, Brandon Cooks, Deontay Johnson, Robbie Anderson, Preston Williams, Will Fuller, Sterling Shepard, John Brown, Laviska Shenault, Jamison Crowder, Anthony Miller, Brian Edwards, Hunter Renfrow.
Okay, that might be why. But I love some Hunter Renfrow now. But like, there's a couple of those guys I would consider, especially because like we don't know like with the rookies. Like I don't know where they're gonna go. Like I don't know where Laviska Shenault's gonna end up, and he has his injury concern, and Brian Edwards, and I love Brian Edwards, but like there's some of these guys, I could maybe see going ahead of him. A couple of these guys, but most of those guys, I would take over. I would take over N'Keal Harry right now. My mind could change totally if they really make some moves here that kind of out of left field and they're able to do some things that maybe my mind changes a little bit. But I'm just not all that hyped on N'Keal Harry, and I just don't get it. And so, like, if you have people who love N'Keal Harry like this, who are taking him like this, I would be sell as fast as I could.
Yeah, so Renfrow was wide receiver 58. Just in case the folks at home weren't keeping up and counting. Two of the receivers that I'm lower on, one of them you mentioned, A.J. Brown. He's going at wide receiver 11. To replicate the efficiency of what he did last year is just going to be super difficult to do. Kev, I know your favorite word every offseason is regression. And AJ Brown's touchdown rate is just unsustainable. I think, like, as much as we poke fun at that word, I mean that's definitely going to hit him. I mean he had a 15% touchdown rate, and then if you look at what he did over the playoffs, I mean he literally just disappeared. He destroyed. He had some massive weeks, 20, 25, 30-point weeks during the regular season. In the playoffs, over 3 games, 10 targets, and he went 5 for 64 and 1 over 3 games. And just like I said, for him to be able to repeat what he did in terms of his touchdowns, and I mean, he had some games where it was just like 3 for 153 and like 2 touchdowns. Like I just don't see any way he's going to be able to sustain that. So he's somebody that I'm lower on, and a guy that we touched on a little bit earlier as well that I'll hit on quickly here. Stephon Diggs at wide receiver 18, I believe it was. I just don't like the landing spot. I don't think he should be bumped down a lot lower. I still think he should be in that wide receiver 2 range, but more at the back end of wide receiver 2 rather than the middle where he is right now.
Yeah, I mean Diggs is like we kind of talked about. Like I'm okay with where he's going at wide receiver 18, but I know we kind of had a pretty heated debate about this last week with him. So I don't hate it. If like I said, if you took him a little lower, I could understand. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump over to tight ends, and then we will. I think we're gonna do a mock if we have enough time. So, anyways, let's. For me, it's Blake Jarwin. Love some Blake Jarwin. I think he's a guy that's going to gain more and more hype as the season or as the offseason goes by, especially if they don't do a whole lot to address that position in the draft. Now we know Jason Witten is finally gone. He is now in Oakland, so I'm perfectly okay with that. Because I think Blake Jarwin really has a potential here to be a big beneficiary here in this offense. They don't have Randall Cobb as well. They lost him. And so, I mean, right now we're basically looking at Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup, and I think that Blake Jarwin could factor in being the number 3 target here in this offense. And he had some decent weeks last year. They utilized him a ton. I mean, he did have one game against Chicago where he had 6 receptions, but other than that, he never went over 3. But I mean, he had 12 points week 1, he had 11 points week 9, 11 points week 14, which as a tight end, I mean that you don't really hate that. So I just think that in this offense with Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott, with in another contract year because it doesn't look like they're going to get a deal done there. Like I like Blake Jarwin a lot, and he's essentially free in a lot of places. So I love Blake Jarwin, and I think he's somebody that I would definitely be looking to invest in. And then the other one is Dallas Goedert. Like I don't think his price is egregious, but I think he's going at tight end 11. I like Dallas Goedert a lot. Like the dude is a monster. And right now, like I said, they don't really have a lot of passing options, so they're gonna continue to run a lot of 2 tight end sets. And I think Dallas Goedert is definitely the tight end of the future there in Philadelphia. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was Zach Ertz last year in Philadelphia. So I love Dallas Goedert and getting in a little bit a year early, but somebody who's going to be able to still provide you with some fantasy, with some upside. Somebody that you could probably still feel comfortable with starting on most weeks as well. So I love Dallas Goedert, and at tight end 11, I think it's still a decent enough value that you can feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, with tight ends being the absolute dumpster fire that they are, like you said, I don't think that price is egregious. And if this is Ertz last year, you're going to be able to pick him up at a discount, and then we're going to be. I mean, I think if Ertz is out next year and they don't do anything crazy in terms of picking up taking a tight end next year, top 2 rounds or anything crazy like that. I think we're going to be looking at Goddard as top 3 tight end by, this time next year. So I like that call a lot. The guys that I'm going to throw out here, one we've already touched on a little bit, so I'm not going to go too far into it, but Chris Herndon, just with the opportunities, if he's able to get on the field, going at tight end 23 right now, I think he could be a really nice value at that spot. And this one's going to change, obviously, with the trade that happened. But Hayden Hurst was going at tight end 31. That's obviously way too low. That's going to jump up. It wouldn't surprise me if he jumped up into like the top 10 range, definitely a top 12. But even at that, we didn't get to see too much of him in Baltimore. We do have to remember that he was actually their first round pick in that draft, and they took Andrews, I think, in the 3rd round. But now that he's going to have the opportunity to be the guy, but with obviously he's going to be lower on the target chart with Ridley and Julio there, obviously, and then if depending on how much Gurley gets used, but Hayden Hurst is going to jump up, and he's going to be somebody that I'd be targeting, and I don't think his price is going to get out of control. So if you're in a dynasty league that requires a starting tight end, he's someone who you might be able to go out and snag on the cheap. 2 guys that I am lower on, Evan Ingram at tight end 5, dude just can't stay healthy. I would not feel comfortable taking him at that price. And then Austin Hooper at tight end 6. Especially if Njoku stays there, which I hope that doesn't happen. I hope Njoku gets a chance to go elsewhere and be the guy. Maybe a change of scenery will do him good. But they ran tight end sets a lot in that Stefanski offense last year with Rudolph and Irv Smith. So if Njoku's there, now you're talking about battling with targets between Chubb, Hunt, Odell, Landry. So I'm just not sure how the opportunity is going to shake out there for him. So those are 2 guys that I am lower on. Cav, did you have anybody that you want to talk about?
Not necessarily guys that I guess one I could probably bring up is Jonnu Smith. I think people look at him and we kind of, okay, Delaney Walker left and is no longer there. So people are like, oh my God, Jonnu Smith is going to blow up. But like, Jonnu Smith has basically been the starting tight end for the Titans for the last 2 years and hasn't really done anything with the opportunity.
Right.
He's not, I mean, tight end 15 isn't crazy. So like, I'm not like knocking it that much. He's just not somebody like I would probably rather have Ian Thomas. And to be honest, like looking at some of these now, like I mentioned Blake Jarwin, much rather have him. Put Jack Doyle at tight end 28. Like, I don't understand that one at all. Like, that makes no sense to me. He's going to be their starting tight end. Now, they could draft somebody, and maybe that changes some things if they were to take, like, Alberto or something in the second round or something crazy like that. But, like, Jack Doyle, tight end 28, give me that all day, twice on Sunday, especially with Eric Ebron gone. Or even Eric Ebron, now in Pittsburgh, who's going to tight end 33. So I don't know. Like there's just some tight ends here that I just feel like that is mispriced. And Jonnu Smith at tight end 15, I don't love it. And so I know at the end of the year he kind of started to come on a little bit and things started to click a little bit. And so maybe you get a little excited about that. But I don't know about Jonnu. I know there's a lot of hype around him and people are starting to really love him. But he's had opportunities and he just hasn't done a whole lot with it. So those would probably be the guys. And then, like I mentioned, those other couple tight ends that I think those are interesting buys as well. Right now, where a lot of people aren't really looking at it. So let's go ahead and we're going to do a mock draft through Fantasy Pros. It's their draft wizard. It's the easiest way probably to do a mock draft of anywhere that you could possibly do one because you don't have to wait on all these people to make picks and people who just ruin the draft by picking like 13 quarterbacks and just ruins it. Like Fantasy Pros doing the draft wizard is so much easier. So we're going to go ahead and do kind of like a startup dynasty draft. It's only a one quarterback. We'll probably go back and do a super flex draft another time. But right now it's one quarterback, two running backs, three wide receivers, a tight end, two flexes, no defenses or kickers because there should never be those, and 6 bench spots. So, if you're not following along on the YouTube, we'll go through and kind of talk about a little bit here as quickly as we can to kind of get this to wrap this up. But let me Chrome tab mock draft. All right. So let's go ahead and introducing our new. Okay, sure. Your draft is loading.
What do we know what spot we have, Kev?
We are 5th pick.
Okay.
So we are on the clock right now. So the first four, so the guys we could go with right now, we have Zeke still on the board, Dalvin Cook, Devontae Adams, Tyreek, Chris Godwin, Juju, get out of town. Joe Mixon's still there, Nick Chubb. Who would you go with here if you were on the clock?
Man. With this being a startup draft, I tend to lean toward receiver. So for me, this decision is going to come down between Zeke or Devontae Adams for me. Who would you be looking at this point?
Yeah, this is tough. I would probably go Zeke. I think that's a pretty decent price for him. I mean, typically you're looking at going in the top 3. So getting him in the fit, with this pick, I think I feel pretty comfortable going with Zeke. The only issue with him that does make you a little concerned is, I think that you get a little PTSD from what happened with Todd Gurley, who's only 25 and he's kind of falling off, starting to, and then David Johnson. Like you start to see some of these guys who kind of fall off a little bit sooner. But I still feel comfortable. Zeke has never missed a game, outside of injury. So I still feel pretty good with them. So, yeah, let's go ahead and go with Zeke.
Yeah, like I said, that makes sense.
Oh, Joe Mixon just went. Son of a – that's what I was hoping we could get. All right, so as of now, Amari Cooper, DJ Moore, Josh Jacobs, George Kittle, Leonard Fournette all still available. Miles Sanders. Let's see. Where's the draft board? Okay, so basically since the last time we picked Dalvin Cook, Tyreek, Devontae Adams, Nick Chubb, Odell Beckham, Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, and Julio have all come off the board. Like, I feel like this is an opportunity where we could grab another running back. You could take Josh Jacobs, which I've already talked about. Love Josh Jacobs. But if we're looking at a wide receiver, I think DJ Moore wouldn't be terrible. But I don't know how you feel about having him as your kind of like your wide receiver one.
I would lean toward Amari Cooper here, but the only thing that would push me off of that is just loading up on the Cowboys this early. Like that's obviously they're both good enough to where they're not gonna really affect each other, but that's just one of those things where you're obviously plugging those two in every single week without question, no matter who they're playing. And if they have a bad game, that's gonna sink you. You talked about liking him earlier. Let's double up on the running back and let's go Josh Jacobs. I just feel like with the depth that at receiver, if you can start your draft with, like I said, normally I tend to lean toward receiver, but if you can get yourself two young stud running backs like that at the 5 and then whatever that is coming back the 7th pick or whatever it is, I think that's something that's worth looking into. Like I said, because of the depth at the position.
Right. And so, I mean, I would be doing backflips to start off with Zeke and Josh Jacobs. So, all right. So DJ Moore, Amari Cooper, Kenny Galladay, Aaron Jones, AJ Brown, Austin Eckler, Lamar Jackson, Cortland Sutton, Leonard Fournette, and Miles Sanders all went ahead of us. And so now here we are. We sitting on the clock. We have George Kittle. We have Travis Kelce. It is a single quarterback. So, Patrick Mahomes, I don't think. If you wanted to go there, I would. I mean, I guess I can understand it, especially being a dynasty league, somebody that you feel supremely confident in having for the next, I don't know, 10 years as being the best quarterback in the league, maybe possibly longer. So I don't hate that. Like, in terms of dynasty, I guess it's a good question too. Where is it that you look to take a quarterback? I know in redraft we always talk about late round quarterback, late round quarterback, late round quarterback. Do you take that same approach in a dynasty league?
Yeah, personally I do. Something like we talked about whenever we had Silva on last summer. You can get into some of these, if you get into a league where everyone's kind of paying attention to everything, you could end up snagging a Pat Mahomes like later. Like if he would fall to like the end of the 4th, maybe that's a place where I might think about pulling the trigger. And with that, it's your Lamar Jackson and Pat Mahomes. Like there are a few exceptions I would make there, but in general, I'm going late round. Like a guy we talked about a little bit earlier whenever we were going over the ADP stuff, like a Matt Ryan. QB 15. He's somebody I'd feel super comfortable, and you can obviously wait to snag him. So. Late quarterback, I think, is the way that I would like to go because I like to build that depth. But if somebody like a Pat Mahomes falls because you're drafting with a bunch of guys who are basically playing quarterback chicken, I would take him 4th, end of the 4th, beginning of the 5th.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could probably see him going higher in terms of that. But so what do we want to do? Do we want to go George Kittle or Travis Kelce? And lock up tight end, a position of scarcity, or would we rather go take our first wide receiver and go with like an Allen Robinson, somebody like that?
Yeah, I think at this point I would still lean receiver. So who do you want to go with? I mean, I would be completely comfortable taking A-Rob as my wide receiver 1 on a team. I don't know how you feel.
No, I'm perfectly okay with that. I definitely. So let's do that. We'll go old A-Rob. Love me some Allen Robinson. So we just locked up Allen Robinson with the 30th pick. Shortly after that, let's see. Keenan Allen, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Stephon Diggs, Marlon Mack, Patrick Mahomes, Todd Gurley, and Tyler Lockett all came off the board. So let's see what we have sitting there. So Calvin Ridley, DJ Chark, Michael Gallup, Tyler Boyd, Adam Thielen, Robert Woods, Jarvis, Deshaun Watson, Terry McLaurin, Kenyon Drake, Debo Samuel also out there. for me, like if I was taking here, like I'd be really intrigued with Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley could be is a solid wide receiver too. Get him in the 4th round. Tyler Boyd is out there as well. I think he's an interesting play as well. And then Jarvis Landry is always undervalued.
Did DK Metcalf go? Did you say his name?
I don't. Did he go? I thought he did.
Okay. Yeah, no, I like Ridley. If you want to go there, what kind of like what I tried doing in both Dynasty and Redraft is kind of balancing your kind of like safe floor guys, which I consider A-Rod, but he obviously has the ceiling too. But then going after a ceiling guy like a Calvin Ridley.
All right, let's go with Calvin Ridley. Mark, what was our next wide receiver? So we had a little bit of run at tight end. Debo, Adam Thielen, Evan Ingram, Austin Hooper, Devin Singletary, Jarvis Landry, Devontae Parker. Crazy to see him go in the 5th round. Zach Ertz, DJ Chark. So at this point, we have 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers. Still some pretty solid wide receiver value, to be honest with you. On the board at wide receiver, we still have Gallup, Tyler Boyd, Robert Woods, and then Deshaun Watson, Terry McLaurin, Kenyon Drake, David Montgomery, Christian Kirk. Where do you want to go here?
I would go receiver again here. My top choices would be Gallup, Boyd. I think is who I would lean here. What are you thinking? What's going through your head right now with having 2 backs and 2 receivers?
I feel pretty solid at running back right now, so I don't think it's an absolute need to grab one. We already have our top 2 spots filled up, and in PPR formats, with flex spots, I would much rather have wide receivers to fill those spots with than the running back. So I feel solid about with the running backs we have. And so I would much rather go wide receiver. I love Michael Gallup. I think it hurts him a little bit with Mari Cooper there, but I do still think that there's certainly enough targets to go around for Gallup as well. So I would be perfectly fine with Gallup. I would be perfectly okay with Tyler Boyd as well. I like both of them as options here. So I would be fine with either one of them. So do you want to go Boyd? I know you really like him as well.
Yeah, I love both those guys. I don't think you can necessarily go wrong there.
All right. So here we are. We're going up in the 6th round. Le'Veon Bell, Robert Woods, Michael Gallup, Deshaun Watson, Chris Carson, James Conner, Christian Kirk, and T.Y. Hilton have all come off the board. We are in the 6th round. We currently have Ezekiel Elliott, Josh Jacobs, Allen Robinson, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd.
I love that team, by the way.
Yeah, this is a pretty strong squad we got going on here. I do like, so right now, looking at the guys who are still left, I think Kenyon Drake is a pretty nice little option here we could take, as a backup running back. We saw how much he was utilized last year in Arizona. David Johnson gone. Like, I feel like this is, especially right at this point in the season, if they don't do anything in the draft in terms of addressing the running back position, Chase Edmonds is still there, but Kenyon Drake could be an absolute steal here, getting him in the 6th round in this offense. Still young, So you look at the other options that are on the board right now. Marquise Brown, definitely, I can't do it in the 6th round. Philip Lindsay, we've already talked about in this podcast. Russell Wilson, if you want to take a quarterback early, I don't hate it, but 32, I don't love it. N'Keal Harry, oh my God, here you are with this. Like, I can't get it. 6th round, N'Keal Harry, no thanks. Darius Geis is still on the board. Will Fuller, who we've kind of talked about, we think they'll definitely go much higher once we get closer to, or especially post draft. But right now, I think for me, with everything that's on the board, I think I'm great with Kenyon Drake.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. The other guy I would think about would be Marquise Brown, but I do think that's a little too early. I'm not going to pull a trigger on quarterback right now. Like there's not a massive difference maker. Although I did love seeing that apparently Russell Wilson is finally opening his mouth and talking about that he wants to run like a higher tempo, and a more passing friendly offense. So if that does come true, which who knows what Pete Carroll's going to do up there. You would think after you paid your quarterback all that money, if he wants to, if he's finally going to peep up and say that he wants to, start running things a little bit differently, you would do that. But, Pete Carroll going to Pete Carroll. So
It's about damn time too. Russell Wilson has had a lot of his
oh my
career
God.
wasted away as being just this low volume offense, and it's just ridiculous. The dude, arguably top. I think you can make a case he's the second best quarterback in the league, behind Patrick Mahomes.
He's so good.
Yeah,
He's so good.
the dude is ridiculous. He's never had he never really has any weapons. He's always has to make something do. Whether it was just Doug Baldwin and Tyler Lockett started coming on and Doug Baldwin retired. Like I don't know. Like Russell Wilson doesn't get enough respect. Like the dude definitely, in my opinion, should be the number 2 quarterback. Like in terms of just the best quarterbacks in the league. Like he's certainly still there in that category. So yeah. Anyways, so here we are. So now we have Zeke, Josh Jacobs, Allen Robinson, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd. Then we took Kenyon Drake. So on the board now we have Dak Prescott, Hunter Henry, Will Fuller, Darren Waller, Curtis Samuel, no thank you, Mark Ingram, TJ Hawkinson, McCole Hardman, Carson Wentz, Sony Michel, David Johnson. Crazy 7th round. Still seeing him there. Where would you go here?
What are like the top receiving options, both at wide receiver and tight end? Is there anything that's sticking out to you there?
Well, I do think that if we don't take a tight end soon, we're going to be left with some because we have Hunter Henry and then Darren Waller, T.J. Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert, who is still all there. O.J. Howard, Mike Gesicki is still out there, but once you start getting past them, we're getting into some rougher territories. And then wide receiver, you have Curtis Samuel, Will Fuller, McCole Hardman, Robbie Anderson, John Brown, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, Deontay Johnson. Which, if he's there on the way back, I might have some interest depending on what guys go. But I feel like maybe this wouldn't be a bad spot to actually take a tight end before we miss out completely.
What do you think happens with Hunter Henry? Just kind of while we're talking about this, is he getting?
It's tough.
Tagged.
Well, yeah, but it's tough though with him because of the fact that I don't know what ceiling you can expect from Tyrod. I know that the offense was pretty bad last year under Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers threw a ton of interceptions, but like Tyrod is definitely not someone who's going to throw interceptions and makes better decisions. So I can see him leaning more on Keenan Allen and Hunter Henry than really opening things up with Mike Williams. But if you go back and remember back when he was in Buffalo, I mean, that was really his only target he was ever able to really because, I mean, Robert Woods was there. Robert Woods was never really a thing until he went to L.A., but Sammy Watkins, who's always been was definitely used more of as a deep threat in times in Buffalo. So I don't know. Like this is a tough situation right now where we're kind of sitting. Where I love Hunter Henry as a player, and I still feel great if I have, especially at the tight end position. I still think that if healthy, if he can remain healthy this year, I think that he could easily be a top 5 tight end.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Let's lock it. Because like you said, if we don't take one now, we're waiting until tight end 23, 24 is coming off the board.
All right.
I just saw some of those rookies coming off the board, and that wasn't even. So this is probably a little bit behind because the rookies are probably just being introduced at this point. So some of these guys are probably going to go earlier than than where we are right now.
Yeah, I saw. What was it? I think it was.
Like I saw Swift, I saw Lamb, I saw Judy.
Yeah, Judy, Lamb, and Swift. Has Jonathan Taylor already come off the board? No way. He had to have gone already, right?
I don't know, man. If you know, what I mean, if they're pulling this off of like recent ADP, I know DLF. I don't think added the rookies in until I think it was this month that they, yeah, it was either March or February that they threw the rookies in with obviously with the guys that are already in the league.
I don't see any. Oh wait. Oh, okay. There's J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, Keyshawn Vaughn. Where do you search? Why do we let you search for a player? Do you see a search?
What at the top maybe?
Well, I think that's like searching. Oh, fucking idiot. Let's see. Has he been taken? Must have. I don't see him. Doesn't show up.
I mean, if he's sitting there, give me fucking Cam Akers, boy.
Cam Akers over J.K. Dobbins.
Yes.
All right. Did it. Locked him up. Cam Akers. So.
Oh, we just got sniped. Does that say deal?
See, we could have waited, and I could have had, playoff Damien's still there though, in the 9th round. So basically, right now we have our Zeke, Josh Jacobs, Allen Robinson, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Hunter Henry, Kenyon Drake, and Cam Akers. So we can pretty much do whatever we want. But where are we at on quarterback? So Josh Allen, Baker. So most of the guys are still there. Matt Ryan's still sitting there. Kirk Cousins, Drew Lock, still later in the round. So yeah, I mean, I still think there's probably enough there. Do you feel the need that we have to take a quarterback now in the 9th round?
No, I think we can wait.
All right. So
what are the top? Good.
Now I was gonna say if I was on the clock right now, and if it was me, I would probably take Damian Williams as a depth piece because he's gonna, somebody that I can. Because right at this point, we don't know where Cam Akers is going to go and what his situation is going to look like. So feeling comfortable with him, I think, is a bit of a stretch. And I think a lot of the other players that are out there are a little bit more unknown versus what Damian Williams would be.
What are the top receiving options looking like?
Darius Slayton, Corey Davis, Anthony Miller, Preston Williams, Alshon, James Washington, D.D. Westbrook, Paris Campbell, John Ross, JJ Whiteside, Jamison Crowder.
Sega. I would go Crowder or Williams, Damian Williams here. Your call.
We could do both. Let's do Damian and see what happens. Oh, Antonio Brown. That's interesting. In the 10th. I really hope he doesn't go to Tampa. I'm gonna be so mad if he goes to Tampa.
Dude, that would. How high would you take Brady if that happens? Like what would be like the ceiling kind of like quarterback what for you?
I think you could probably have him as a QB. I think he'd probably be viewed more as a QB1, but I think that he would be overdrafted. And I think people would take him way too high, and I would never even get a chance to take him, to be honest.
So what do you think, like 14? Is that like as high as you would take him? Because that's kind of like the area that I'd be thinking.
Yeah, I'd probably be somewhere around there.
Yeah. And if that happens, that's the kind of case where I would want the quarterback over the weapons. You know what I mean?
For sure. It's just tough. Like it would kill. Like I feel like that would just ruin. Like I don't know if you don't feel comfortable. Yeah, Chris Godwin or Mike Evans or Antonio. Man, that would just. I don't know. I wouldn't feel great about any of them, to be honest with you at that point. So I hope it doesn't happen. Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it, Antonio Brown. But so we took Damian Williams, Corey Davis, Anthony Miller, Rashad Penny, D.D. Westbrook, Josh Allen, Jared Goff went off the board. And then Alshon, J.K. Dobbins, Sammy Watkins, James White, Royce Freeman, Antonio Brown. And then we took Jamison Crowder, Darrell Henderson, Tevin Coleman, Tariq Cohen, Darius Slayton, Andy Isabella, T.J. Hawkinson, Preston Williams, Matt Breida, Duke Johnson, and Justice Hill are off the board. So we're still waiting on a quarterback, and then we have 4 bench spots left. Let's see. Let's go check out Baker Mayfield is still sitting out there, which is interesting. But yeah, Matt Ryan, Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, Kirk Cousins, Drew Lock, Drew Brees, all those cats, Tom Brady. But this is a dynasty league, so. Anyways, do you want to go quarterback, or would you rather take another fill in the depth?
Dude, this is a name I should have brought up when we did the ADP price check. But did I see Paris Campbell sitting at the top of that wide receiver list?
He is second. Yeah, James Washington. I don't know what people are thinking with that, but no thanks on that deal. But if we play this right, I think we could get both of the players because I really like Tony Pollard. Oh, man, we have Zeke, though. I don't know if I'd want to do that.
I really like Paris Campbell. He would be my pick here. And like I said, he's someone I should have brought up. I just pulled him up on DLF, and he is currently wide receiver 59.
All right, we took Paris Campbell. So I feel like we definitely could still use some wide receiver depth. We could take Derek Brown's boy, Miles Boykin, wide receiver 66 on here. Rashad Perriman, Hunter Renfrow, that's way too low for Hunter Renfrow, in my opinion. He showed a pretty strong chemistry last year with Derek Carr, so he looks to be the quarterback there, and at least for this year. So Hunter Renfrow, I think that is incredibly low for him. Or would a quarterback suit your fancy here with what's actually out there?
This is probably the area of the draft where I would. Baker's still sitting there, right?
Yep.
This is probably an area of the draft where I don't like none of those receivers you were rattling off. I felt like I needed to grab one of them before, before they came off the board. So this is probably kind of the area of the draft where I'd probably take my quarterback.
Darwin Thompson in the 13th. Oh my God. Okay, so let me. Is there any?
I bet there's still like a.
Rookies are still out there.
Yeah.
Justin Jefferson. Would that do anything for you?
That
he's
would.
still out there.
I would like Jefferson here. If Rager's still sitting out there, Denzel Mims.
Rager's gone. Mims is still out there.
Yeah, I would go Mims or Jefferson at this point. I like that.
Let's go Jefferson. So, okay. Yeah, so there's still rookie. Keyshawn Vaughn is still available. Okay, Justin Jefferson went off the board.
Yeah, we took him, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm an idiot. What a Moran. Justin Jefferson.
Man, whoever just took Justin Jefferson, man, what a steal. Damn good drafters. Son of a bitch.
Denzel Mims is who I was thinking. We could still take him if we wanted.
Do it.
All right, so we're going to keep going down that rookie wide receiver. And then we'll call up on our last pick. Let's see what all is out there. Is there anything that No. I mean, Miles Boykin, if that, but I feel like I want a running back with our last pick. What do you think?
Yeah. Pick your poison. Who are you looking at here?
I think I want to take. Okay, Keyshawn Vaughn is still out there. He can't be, right? Let's just make sure that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still available too. I think
Yeah,
I'd update this.
Yeah, this kind of.
Come on, Fantasy Pros. Anyways, all right. We got a C plus. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but
C's get degrees, right?
Yeah, Baker Mayfield, Zeke, Josh Jacobs, Allen Robinson, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Hunter Henry, Kenyon Drake, Cam Akers, Damian Williams, Jameson Crowder, Paris Campbell, Justin Jefferson, Denzel Mims, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Let's see what our projected standings would be, just for fun. Oh, our starters would be great. Our bench is awful, and overall 8th. But I think that, I don't feel like they're calculating in like all of our rookies, maybe. That's why, because they have our bench at 34. Like, that seems unlikely. But we have the best starters.
I just pulled up the DLF's overall ADP, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going at 60th overall. So, I mean, you're definitely not getting him at the spot we just took him.
Yeah, so I think we'll have to do that again. Hopefully they continue to update everything, because there's no way all those rookies were just chilling there in a dynasty draft. So, anyways, I thought that was a lot of fun. Got to kind of play around with this. Maybe this is something we should start doing more often, and maybe once a week or once every couple of weeks we start doing some, or maybe even after the draft, once we kind of get all the pieces in, we can continue to do more of these and do some for redrafts and everything else. So. It's fun to talk through the process of how we would do everything. So, but anyways, we've been going for 2 hours and 11 minutes. Well, I don't know what happened to we're going to start doing shorter podcasts. What happened here? We've been going longer and longer.
We started off pretty well. I think we were hitting that 1 and 115 range, and then we were like, well, you know what? We did it 2 weeks in a row, so fuck it. Let's just go back to 2.5, 3 hour long pods. I think that's what happened.
Yeah, so I definitely think maybe we might be breaking this one up or something. We'll figure something out. 2 hour podcast. So, anyways, I really appreciate everybody tuning in. If you're listening to this on podcast, please subscribe. Leave a comment and review. It really helps us out. Really appreciate it. Whether we're available on Spotify. We're available on Podbean. We're available on Google Play. I mean, we're pretty much available. If it's a podcast app, we're out there for the TFA podcast. We also have the DFS DJ Nation podcast that will come back, once DFS season starts rolling around, preseason DFS, stuff like that. If you are listening on podcast, please go check us out, our YouTube channel. We're going to start doing more native content for that as much as we possibly can to start putting out, just stuff for YouTube as well. And if you want, you can hit us up and join our Slack channel. Like I said, we talk Dynasty, we talk redraft, we talk DFS. Not a lot of DFS right now with no sports going on. But other than that, I really appreciate everybody tuning in. And until next time, peace.